Hi there. Welcome to On the Flip Side, a podcast for anyone who wants to live their best sales life. We're going to be talking to buyers, sales managers, STRs, and A's about things like what does it take to be a great sales manager? Or how can you go home happy month after month? So let's dive right in. Hi there. Welcome to On the Flip Side with Wingman. I'm your host, Kushal. Today, we're joined by someone who is a 3 times sales leader and a 3 times VP of sales for B2B SaaS startups. He has built and scaled GTM AE teams from scratch and many, many more accolades on his LinkedIn. Do go check them out. He's now the founder of FDTC from Demo to Close, which runs sales demo coaching and training programs for AEs. He's also the host of the SaaS Talks podcast. Mor, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me.
So, more before we go ahead, you've obviously led so many teams to meet their targets, really. And if you had
Mhm.
to distill it, what would you say is the secret sauce to succeeding as a sales leader?
As a sales leader, I think I made a post about this actually this morning, but the getting your mindset right and realizing that the team doesn't work for you and you work for the team. It's important to set that mindset because once you have a reframe of that, then everything that you do in that job moving forward is all about enabling your team. So that's, getting them sales training, sales coaching, doing one-on-ones, investing in their education, investing in their personal life. So if you see that they're getting burnt out, giving them time off. And so realizing that you really aren't their boss. If anything, they're your boss.
I really love that approach, and I do recall seeing it on your LinkedIn before the show as well. Just curious, isn't this already how sales leaders think of their teams?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the way I think. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but at least in my experience and what I've seen and the people that have talked to me and that hasn't been the case. They don't, some sales leaders aren't providing the right tech stack for their team. Some are not offering any sort of stipend. They're making their sales team pay out of pocket for, sales education. They are maybe spending some time with them during onboarding, and then after onboarding they sort of like leave them to figure it out. There's a really well-known company, I won't even say it, I won't say the name, but they're extremely well known in the B2B SaaS space. Everybody knows them, and somebody from that team, a salesperson from that team, said that their manager has a team of 16 reps under them, 16 sales reps, which is too much to handle for one sales manager. And the last time that they had a one-on-one with the sales manager was, in the conversation we had, was the previous quarter, and they
Wow, once a
tried booking
quarter.
a one. Yeah, they tried booking a one-on-one with them, and then the manager had to cancel because they had to go to something else. They didn't even reschedule it. So I think it's just you think that sales managers and sales leaders and VPs of sales are thinking that way, but they're not. A lot of them are not. And I think for some of them, it could be a culture thing where the CEO is releasing sort of like this pressure that's coming up from the VCs, and this just has this ripple effect across the board. And the way the CEO is behaving with the VP of sales is the way the VP of sales is behaving with the sales team. I personally experienced it where I was trying to create this culture within my organization with my sales team, but the CEO had a different mentality of what culture was. And so there was a lot of resistance because I was trying to do one thing and he was trying to do another thing. And so you either sort of join if you can't beat them, join them. And so I had to become like the CEO in terms of the mentality. So
I think that's great insight into really the thought process and really why people behave the way that they behave. I think having that sort of insight is really helpful. Not that that's the complete solution to the problem, of course. But since we're talking about this, in your experience, what are really the major challenges that these VPs of sales are facing today?
the major challenges, so there's a bunch, right? So one thing I mentioned, CEOs are at least in the B2B SaaS space, right? So CEOs are projecting pretty ambitious numbers and forecasts, and they share that with the VCs. And the VC says, wow, that's great. You believe that you can hit it? CEO says, yes. CEO then comes back to the VP of sales during their, quarterly business review call or whatever it is. And they say, hey, we have to hit these targets. Now, the VP of sales can push back, but if they push back, they could seem like they're not confident in the targets. And so they say, okay, fine, I'll go after these targets. That's what we'll hit. And then they don't hit it. They hit a little bit under, and the under hitting target that they hit was actually really good. But then after 18 months, they say, okay, this is not what we want. So dealing with the pressure and the BS that comes from CEOs, which comes from the VCs, is very much, it's very annoying. That's one of the challenges that VP of sales deal with. Another thing that they deal with is not having enough autonomy. And I mentioned this before. I remember I was a VP of sales and I had a few toxic employees, salespeople specifically. When I say toxic, I mean every new hire that came along, they would pull them to the side and talk crap about the company, whatever it was. They would always have something to say. They really just poisoned the environment. And I wanted to let them go. I wanted to fire them because it's just I'd rather not have them. And I remember I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I got like a mentor from HubSpot, like an executive sales executive at a very high level. He got on the phone with me and he said, if your company tolerates assholes, then you have nothing. There's nothing you can do here. If they don't, then you have to fire them. You shouldn't have them on your team, even if they're performing really well. So I think the challenge for a lot of VPs of sales is we have this like top performer, maybe top performers. Like without them, our numbers are going to dip. But they're so toxic. What do we do? Do we keep them? Do we not keep them? And so I think a lot of companies end up keeping these toxic top performers, which is just not a good example to set for everybody else. And so I remember when I came to the founders and I said, we have to get rid of this person. They said no. Until the company sold, a new CEO came along. And I said, she's like, okay, what do you want? I'm like, I want to fire this person. Really toxic. And I did that. And it set the tone for the rest of the team. And the environment became a little bit more optimistic. People enjoyed coming to work. The reviews, the surveys that they sent to the employees was positive now. So I think having autonomy and letting them sort of fly on their own is an important thing also. Yeah, so that's one of the many challenges.
I think that's a powerful point there. And I think it also goes to show that I think these sales leaders are in a tough spot as well, right? Where on one hand, they have these targets that are clearly not, they're not relentless really. And on the other hand, you might have, a toxic, workforce or teams. And it's really hard to drive the culture that you want to. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to make calls that you don't want to. And like you said, in situations, you may not have that autonomy as well. So yeah, I guess that's a tough spot to be in to begin with.
It is. I think, people talk about SDRs having the hardest jobs in sales. Yeah, I'm not discounting that it's hard. It's a hard job, but talk to me first once you become a VP of sales, because you are always under the gun. You have to please the CEOs and the partners and the board while pleasing your salespeople. But the CEO and the board don't necessarily see eye to eye with the sales team. And so you're the sandwich in the middle and playing therapist on both sides. It is a really stressful job. And you don't get the recognition that you should get. So SDR is hard. VP of sales is much harder.
Understood. Tell us more about FDTC, right? What led you to kind of company?
Yeah. So FDTC stands for From Demo to Close. I launched about 9 months ago. Been profitable ever since, growing, getting a lot of demand for it and a lot of love for it. So when I was a VP of sales, I worked for companies that I wouldn't say necessarily super product-led growth, but we were definitely getting majority of our leads coming inbound through different marketing channels. And majority of the revenue that we closed, the sales that we closed, came from the demos that we did. So we were demo heavy. We were doing a ton of demos every week, every day, every month. And so we were looking at that metric. Now, because that was the core of the revenue that we were closing, it was really important that we optimize the way we were doing demos. And I'm not talking about like one call closes. It could be one demo, two demo, three demo, whatever it is. And so when I was VP of sales, I would go in as an early stage company as the first employee, first sales rep, doing the demos and taking over for the CEO. We got to a point where we were closing the worst person on the sales team. We got them to a point where they were closing half of every demo they gave. So it means every 2 demos that came through, or every 6, they would close half guaranteed. So it was almost like all we have to do is just get more leads, either outbound or inbound. However, when I'm talking about 50% demo conversion rate, I'm also talking about like if we had an outbound lead that came our way, we would close it. So we were really good at doing demos. Company got acquired after only 4 years, did really well there. And then I did some fractional VP of sales, and then I joined another company as VP of sales and also demo heavy. I was like, okay, well, let me see if that was luck or I know what I'm doing.
You got the formula.
I figured out the formula. And that company also, the worst person was doing 60% demo conversion rate. When I say demo deal conversion rate, that had a demo. And then we got to a point where we were doing like 75, 80% demo conversion rate. And then I had a really strong itch I wanted to scratch of opening my own thing. But there are 2 types of people that start businesses. Either one, because they just want to make money, or 2, they believe in something and then they follow that sort of passion. I'm not the type of person that just wants to make money, because I could have done anything else. I could have done Amazon, whatever it was. And I tried it, but then the passion wasn't there. And so I left. And I noticed, so one of the things I do is like I looked at my skill set and I looked at what I've done in the past, who I've helped, how I've helped. And then I look at what's out there and I'm saying, wow, there's plenty of information and content and advice on cold prospecting, how to generate leads through cold calling and cold emailing, and plenty of that. There's not enough about discovery, using your tone of voice to have better conversations, how to present in a way where the prospect is like, wow, this was memorable, and how to close more. So there's not enough of that. So I was like, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go super sub niche. And I launched it in November of 2021 or 2021. And that's what it is. It's a sales training and coaching business around improving sales win rates through discovery, tonality, demos, and closes.
Incredible. I think it's amazing that you kind of figured out where your superpowers lie and also what you're passionate about as well. I think there's incredible growth and personal growth as well to be done when we're in that position. So really talking about these demos now, right? While you're saying, of course, that there is much more knowledge and focus and education available on maybe prospecting better, not so much maybe on demos. It's clearly, a much accepted and known sales motion. What do you think most companies are still getting wrong about demos? I remember seeing on your LinkedIn about a company that still reached out saying, I have the tools, I have the team, but we're still not closing.
What the question is, so why aren't companies getting the demo right? Or can you rephrase the question?
So really, what's the challenge? Why are companies who maybe have the team and the tools and everything in place still not closing deals?
So I think they're closing deals. I just don't think they're closing enough. And so I think they potentially think that the reason why they're not, and I can't speak for every company, but I can tell you what others have said or what I've observed. They think that the lack of revenue closing is the lack of leads that they're generating. And so they're trying to put all this effort into lead generation so they can close the deals. I think some of other companies think, well, we're closing at a good rate, 20%, 30% demo conversion rate, deal win rate. And they think that's good, but they don't know what to compare it to. They think that's good compared to the historic performance of the company. But maybe it's not good. I've had at a company where one of my clients, they were closing 29% demo close rate. They thought it was good. I asked them, is that considered a good in your industry? He's like, yeah, that's great. Blah, 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 blah. After working with me, after 3 months, they were up 42 or 45%, whatever it was. So I think they're only looking at their own environment, being, oh, leads is important, and we're doing pretty good, and people are hitting quota. Because hitting quota is good, but you could be hitting more than the quota that you're hitting. So I think it's a few variables. And some of them are doing fine. Some of them are having a solid demo conversion win rate. Some of them have sales training and they're doing well. And some of them have sales training in place and sales coaching and enablement. And they're not doing well, but they think because they have sales training and enablement, who are you to come out from the outside and teach me how to do it better? So I think it's a mixture of ego and ignorance to an extent of what's happening internally.
It sounds like there is a lot to be said for really reaching out to other folks outside your company for training, benchmarking, really understanding what's working and what's not. Because like you said, sometimes it becomes an echo chamber and you tend to look at your own achievements or your past, your team's past achievements as the benchmark, which is clearly not the case.
That's a very dangerous place to be in, right? That's why I always like when I see companies that are bringing in, I did a workshop for a quarterly business review for a cybersecurity company in July. And I was like, wow, that's so awesome that the VP of sales doesn't feel threatened by an outside sales trainer to come in and do a workshop. And I think I used to be, when I was a VP of sales at one point in my career, I was like, I would never hire a coach or a salesperson. Like, that's my job. It's threatening my job. If I even present that to the CEO, it's like, isn't that what you're supposed to do? But that's not the case in reality.
So going ahead a little bit to really talk about demos, right? Because you're the expert on running mic drop demos. If you really had to distill it down to its bare bones, what do you think are really, makes a demo the perfect demo?
The perfect demo bare bones. So I'll give you like sort of the ingredients. So it's the demo prep. It's the amount of preparation you're doing for the demo. And that means before even the discovery call, the amount of research you're doing and how you're strategizing it. It's sort of like when the Navy SEALs, before they go into a mission, they do a reconnaissance mission to analyze how to approach and how to enter. So you're doing a recon. Demo prep, discovery is probably the most critical one. Without discovery, you can't actually do a proper demo because you have to understand the pain. You have to understand the impact of the pain, how big it is, who's affected by it. And then when you're doing the demo should really be all about what you've learned, how to solve the stuff that you've learned from discovery. The demo itself, it's a mixture of tonality, storytelling, and tailoring. So tailoring meaning you have 30 features on your product. The worst thing that you can do is save the best feature for last. A lot of webinars do that. So if you sign up to a webinar or a YouTube video or even a TikTok, you'll watch, the thing that made you click was the punchline, but they're only giving you the punchline at the end of the video to keep you on longer. That's the whole algorithm. That works for YouTube, TikTok, and everything else. It does not work for demos. Because for demos, prospects aren't trying to, you're not trying to build and hack the algorithm. Prospects want to know how to solve their problems fast. And if they're waiting 30, 45 minutes only to find that out later on, that's a problem. So I like to, so solving problems very fast for the prospect. So prioritizing the features that solve their problems, put that first, not last. And then if there are any other bells and whistles that you want to show them, you can earn the right to show that to them if you've shown the prospect how to solve their problem fast. So I'll do a sort of a recap. So demo prep or call prep, discovery, tonality, storytelling, and tailoring. Obviously, and then you have the meta, which is setting up next steps, the follow-ups. But in terms of doing the demo, that's what sets up a really, really good demo.
Got it. So more just talking a little bit, about, we're obviously in the middle of the economic downturn as well. A lot of industries are feeling the effects. Do you think that companies should be changing their talk tracks to kind of fit this new environment?
When you say talk tracks, in terms of how they're presenting the demo, or how they're talking about in terms of like discovery?
So really, in terms of how they're presenting the demo, does the old world still work, or should they be changing that?
I don't think so, right? Because the demo is, let me show you how to solve your problem fast. So whether we're in an economic downturn or not, who knows, right? Like, sure, you can call it a recession technically, but if a prospect is on a call because they have a problem that they want to solve, then just show them how to solve the problem, regardless of the economy. It's important to talk about budget maybe, and maybe for learning purposes, ask them like, hey, I know you're probably seeing the news as well. Like, what's happening in your organization in terms of like, are you seeing any layoffs or any tightening of budget? You can have that conversation to learn internally what's happening in sort of your ICP. I think it's important, but in terms of presenting the demo, it should be the same. Storytelling, tonality, tailor it, show them how to solve the problem fast. You may get some pushback in terms of like next steps and closing because of that tightening of budget. And if you are experiencing that consistently on your demos, then it's really important to talk about budget very, very early on, like discovery.
Got it. So more, you of course make it sound really easy, right? Like, kind of do A, B, C, D, E, and you're good. There's obviously much more nuance involved there, right? Which is why you probably
Yes.
take the time out with, sales teams to work on it. For sales leaders who are listening in and who are wondering, how can we kind of help our own teams, do better demos? Just curious, how do you really run the process? How do you audit what your teams are currently doing today? And how do you know where to even suggest improvements? What does that process look like?
So there's a bunch. So first of all, there are surprisingly a lot of SaaS companies, B2B, that are doing well, profitable, that they don't have a conversation intelligence solution. Maybe some of your listeners don't actually use like a Wingman or a Gong or whatever. They're using Zoom, and many of them aren't even recording their demos. A ton. Like I'm shocked. A lot of my clients are coming in. I'm like, can you send me a recording of your demo? They're like, we don't have one. I'm like, you don't record your calls? Like, no. I'm like, are you
Problem
kidding
number
me?
one.
Yeah, problem number one, record your calls. You can't improve business decisions without tracking the data. So in order to get the data, you need to record. Now, you can get Zoom and start recording on Zoom, but that's going to be a very manual and tedious process. Plus, Zoom doesn't give you data. So you need data. So you can get like a Wingman, right? So you need a recording software that provides data. Then you need to actually spend time coaching your reps, one-on-one and in group sessions. And what I'd recommend is, instead of, and you're going to find a lot of mistakes that your reps are, the mistake is giving them too many skills to focus on after every session. So if you're sitting with them for 45 minutes or an hour doing a coaching call, you're like, oh my God, you have 10 skills I need you to fix. Discovery, this, that. Give them one skill within discovery. So if it's like maybe finding out the pain points or the decision process or whatever it is, that's a skill they should be working on for the next couple of weeks. And then when you're listening on to their calls in the future, you're paying attention to an improvement of that skill. You can build out scorecards if you want. It helps you track and to see performance. So I would do that. So call recording, scorecards, one-on-one, give them one skill to focus on at a time, and then get the sales rep to self-assess. Meaning, the mistake that a manager or sales leader can do when coaching the reps is they come in, they listen to a call, and they're like, all right, Kushal, this is what you didn't do right. And then they tell you what you didn't do right, but it doesn't give you enough time and enough space to sort of like self-assess and learn. The best way to learn is for you to figure out what you did wrong. So instead of me saying it, I'd say something like, hey, Kushal, we just finished the discovery portion of the call. Based on what you just heard, what do you think you really did well in? So I'm going to let you talk it up. Tell me what you thought you did really well. If there are other things that you did well that you didn't mention, I'm going to tell you, hey, Kushal, you're not giving yourself enough credit. You should have done this. You did this well. You did this well. Good job. Continue doing that. All right. On the flip side, what do you think you could have improved on? If you were in a time machine and you went back into the call and you can do what you now know what you know, what would you do differently? And then I'm going to have you just self-assess and tell me what you've done differently. And then if there's anything missing, then I sort of plug it in. And then I would ask you something like, hey, what do you think is the most important skill that you should focus on the next call? And so it's more collaborative, less of, let me tell you what you did wrong. Let me tell you what you did right. Here's what you should do.
Got it. It sounds like this is a lot about really self-awareness on part of, the A's and the reps as well to kind of understand what they're doing and not doing well. How much self-awareness do you think, the folks that you work with show to begin with, or is that developed over time?
It's developed over time. I have a client right now that I was surprised by his level of self-awareness. The stuff that I picked up on, the nuances when we were listening to a sales call, he called out when I was asking him to self-assess. So, but he's also been in the industry a little bit longer. So maybe, and he's older and he has kids. So maybe you have to become more self-aware because you have a family and you have, you're just more experienced. Some are completely it's like it flies over their head. They have no idea what they did wrong or the main issues. I mean, self-awareness is the biggest one. I didn't. It's sort of a surprising fact. When I got into sales and then, VP of sales and demo and all that, I never took a Sandler sales training course. I never took Medic. I'm not even certified in it. I don't even know the nuances of that whole sales methodologies, and I don't need to, honestly. Yeah, like what? I don't need to, because I was self-aware enough to know to take my time, listen back to my call, like, I didn't, maybe I said that and that's what triggered the prospect not to buy. So on the next call, I'm going to say it differently. And over 4 years and doing thousands of demos, you have enough sort of practice to test out things. And you're like, okay, that validated my thought. And so I ended up building more confidence in my self-awareness. And I realized self-awareness is definitely like a main factor and improvement.
Got it. So it's clear that kind of having experience helps, right? To kind of have done, so many calls and demos clearly, helps. And if you're someone with self-awareness, or if you believe in analyzing, what you're doing, then clearly that path is going to be easier. For folks who are just starting out and, want to get it right, right out from the start, and maybe even yourself, when you first started out, I'm sure there's a difference between the way that done calls, demos, sales really earlier on and now. What would really be, some of your main advice to someone who's really starting out?
If someone's really starting out, I think you're going to lack the confidence to talk freely and confidently and almost be comfortable in silence, because there's going to be moments on the calls where the prospect will ask you a question. You won't know the answer to it, or it's going to be they want the answer now and you want to end the call and it's going to be sort of awkward. You're going to build a confidence where you'll feel comfortable in that awkwardness. But in order to get there, my advice would be to learn your product inside out. If you know your product inside out, then you'll feel a lot more confident, because if you're going to rely on your confidence based on experience and you don't have any, then it's not going to work. But if your confidence comes from your product knowledge, that's a lot easier, right? Your confidence and experience will only come with time and the amount of times you actually do calls. So at least work on something that you can control that's immediate, which is product knowledge. And then what I'd recommend is when you're going into a sales role, if it's your first sales role, second sales role, or you've been an SDR and now you're promoted to an AE and you're doing demos, it's a lot easier. But I would look at customer support tickets, and I'd probably ask the manager of that department and your department if you can spend maybe 1 or 2 weeks answering customer support tickets, as long as it doesn't get involved with your work. But I think maybe after hours, whatever it is. But learning about the types of questions that come in from support will really help you on the demo. So product knowledge, and then actually getting on customer support tickets.
I think that's incredibly useful, and I can see how that could be applied not just to sales actually, but also to marketers, right? Because even for us, it's really important to understand who we're really selling to. So, for instance, I can really see the value in kind of looking at what our customers are actually asking us. what they're able to do themselves, what are still stumbling blocks, and then really test our own knowledge, of our own products. So I think that works 110%. Just to go back a little bit, I know you talked about, dealing with those awkward silences in some way. Sometimes the situation is reversed where you're asking the prospect a question and they fall silent simply because they maybe don't have a handy answer. And I remember, kind of hearing or reading about maybe, when you ask someone a question and they're stumped for a little bit, then maybe don't rush in to comfort them immediately. Actually give your prospect some time to actually think through and have the patience to not sort of rush into that. What's your take on that?
So you're saying this a situation where you're the salesperson, you're on a demo, you're asking the prospect a question and they're staying silent?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if they're staying silent, well, it depends. If you ask them a pretty thought-provoking question, for example, hey, Kushal, like based on what you've seen today, which department do you feel like would best use this particular feature? And they're like, and then they're silent. Yeah, they're clearly thinking and let them think about it. So if that's your question, that'd be my answer. Just stay silent because they're clearly, you can tell when someone's thinking about it. That's why it's a lot. If no one's they're not having their webcam turned on during the demo, it's a big problem because you don't know what they're doing. But if you ask them a question, your webcam is on there, and then they go like this, you clearly see that they're thinking. So let them think.
On that note, what's your recommendation for demos, right? Like video on, video off, if you have a choice.
Video on, video on. And the question is, the second question I get is, should I only turn on my video when I get on a call and if the prospect has their video on, or should I turn? The answer is have your video on always, and that will trigger the prospect to turn theirs on. And if they don't turn theirs on, you can say, hey, like, would you kill me if I asked you to turn on your video? I like to like sort of put a name to a face. And then that will probably tell them to put it on. They may say, oh, I look like crap. Yeah, it's okay. I don't judge. They'll turn it on. Have fun with it. But have it on. You need to read the body language also. And it's important. There's a lot of reasons why you should have your video on besides body language, but it's also engagement. So a lot of times you're on a demo, you're sharing your screen, you're showing the software, and then the prospect asks you a question, or you ask them a question, and you're sort of discussing something that is not directly related to what's on the screen, but you're still sharing your screen. That's really distracting. So what I'd recommend is you stop screen sharing. So now you and the prospect are seeing each other face to face over the webcam. That creates a lot more engagement. When you're talking about price, you show them the pricing page. And then when you're trying to discuss the price, stop sharing screen so you can see each other's faces. It just creates more of a bond, a relationship, intimacy over Zoom, which we don't have when people used to do like deals face to face in person.
Incredible suggestions there, really, Mor. I think they're super helpful. Just switching tracks a little bit and going towards, the next segment. What would you be doing if you were not in your current job?
If I weren't in my current job, meaning I was like, I had the like I could retire, or if I could retire, or if I couldn't retire.
So let's say if you couldn't retire.
If I couldn't retire and I didn't have FDTC, knowing what I know now about launching a business, I'd probably launch another business. Or if I had to go back to like a W-2 type of job, would I go back to a VP of sales role or not? I don't know that I would. I may go to like an individual contributor role because I can control my own efforts and it's harder to control other people's efforts. Or I'd maybe experiment with like maybe marketing or growth, because in order for me, the first year of business is the hardest year. Most people flop and fail. They're not even making a profit, barely breaking even. I made a profit. And so I think I was forced to, because I have 2 kids and I had to figure out, and I had to learn marketing and growth marketing along the way. And so that part really interested me, like partnerships, growth marketing, just content creation. That part's interesting to me, but maybe I'd do something like that.
Got it. So here's the second last question for us for today. Would you like to give a shout out to someone in the industry?
Shout out in the industry? Yeah, there's so many. Let me think about this one for a minute. Let me think about it. I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy Charles Mulbauer. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's him. The reason why is because he came to Miami for a vacation and we connected. He lives in New York. And then we bonded instantly. And most people that I know that I'm friends with and connected with on LinkedIn are living in Texas, New York, or California. And I haven't really met them in person, but I met him in person. So we really built a solid friendship. But he's great. I mean, in terms of like discovery, he also knows what he's talking about big time.
Got it. And here's your last question. And this is really a segment that we play on the show. This is a fun segment which is called Wrong Meanings Only. What happens here is that I will give you three phrases and you have to give me what is a wrong meaning for these three phrases.
Like meaning only wrong answers?
Wrong answers.
Wrong answers
Exactly.
only?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try this. We'll see. I've never done it.
Okay, great. Let's take the first as a sample. The first one is sales demos.
Wrong answers only?
Yes.
Feature dump?
Okay, great. What about discovery calls?
Pitch? Do all the pitching instead of asking?
Okay. And the last one here is really a longer one, but really, kind of founding your own company
Founding your own company.
or really
Wrong
being a
answers
business
only.
owner. Yeah.
Yeah, wrong answers only. Don't network?
Okay, great. Love those more. I think this episode was super useful. I think a lot of tactical advice here as well for sales folks listening in. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.